Shalom Uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We are privileged this evening in our second Haftarah series to study together the Haftarah of Parashat Shekalim. This coming Shabbat, we begin the special readings of the four special Shabbat readings before Pesach, the first of which is the Haftarah, the prophetic reading connecting to the dedication, the rededication, the special funding that Yehoash led to refurbish, to rebuild all the areas of the temple that needed repair due to the lack of regard on the part of the earlier kings. And we read from the 12th chapter of the book of Kings 2. It begins in Ashkenazi communities, at least at the very beginning of the chapter, Perek Yud Bet Pasuk Aleph. The focus, the main character of the Haftarah, I would say, would be Yehoash. A very fascinating study of one of the youngest, if not the youngest king that we know of. It records here his age, the age of 7. He became king with a very fascinating story. Anyone interested can study the background information for chapter 12. I would like to focus on one of the sentences. I'm reading from chapter 12, verse 2 of Kings 2. Bishnat Sheva Liyehu. Bishnat Sheva Liyehu Malach Yehoash. All throughout the book of Kings, there are cross-references between the kings of Yehudah and the kings of Israel. In the 7th year of the kingdom of Yehu, that's the king of Israel, of Israel, Malach Yehoash. Yehoash became the king of Yehudah. V'arba'im shana, Malach Yerushalayim. What a special privilege to read this in Yerushalayim. V'arba'im shana Malach Yerushalayim. And he reigned for 40 years in Jerusalem. And the last part of the sentence is the part that I would like to focus on. V'shem imo tzivya mibe'er shava. And the name of his mother was Tzivya, who stemmed from Beersheba. Tzivya from Beersheba was the mother of this king Yehoash, who is described in our Haftarah in the very next sentence. In sentence 3, as walking uprightly in the eyes of God, following properly in the pathway of that which was proper in the eyes of Hashem. And what fascinates me in the study of the book of Malachim is that so many times, especially with the kings of Yehudah, there is a reference not only to their father's name, but very, very often to their mother's name as well. Now, there are commentaries on our section of study on this Haftarah that the reason why Tzivya has honorable mention is because Tzivya was a woman who led Yehoash. Maybe the introductory comment of Shem Imot Tzivya Meber Shava is connected to the fact that Vayas Yehoash Hayashar Beinei Hashem. Maybe Yehoash did that which was right in the eyes of God precisely because he was the son of Tzivya. Tzivya, although married to a man who was the opposite of righteous, Tzivya followed in the pathways of Hashem, and maybe she carried that tradition on to her son. There are those who want to say that you see from here that the prophet spoke about both parents, the father and the mother. But I made a list of how many times the kings of Yehudah, the names of their mothers, the names of the mothers are listed in the prophets. I'm speaking specifically about the book of Kings. I listed 16. Could be there are more. I have all the references. Anyone wants to see them? You're welcome to come to our home here in Yerushalayim. If you don't believe me, here's the list. Just to read you how many times it says V'shem Imo. Rechavam, king of these are all kings of Yehudah. Rechavam, Aviyam, Asa, Yehoshaphat, Achazyahu, Yehoash. Yehoash is our king. Amatzyahu, Azariah, Yotam, Chizkiah, Menashe, Amon, Yehoachaz, Yehoyakim, Yehoyachin, and Tzidkiyahu. In each and every one of these references, there's a reference to the king's mother. If you're interested in their names, Na'ama, Ma'acha, Azuva, Atalyahu, of course, Tzivya, from our Haftarah, Yehoadan, Yechalyahu, Yerusha, Avi, Chefziba, Mishulemet, Chamutal, Zvuda, Nechushta, Chamuta. Wonderful. What is this? Why mention all these mothers? And I would like to suggest an idea, and I do hope that there's validity to what I'm saying. I would like to suggest that perhaps the person that has to be reminded most of his mother, and perhaps the centrality of his mother in his particular life, is the king of Yehuda, the leading power in our nation, the monarch of our nation. Perhaps precisely because he's reached the stage where he's the towering figure. Who has time to remember his ima? His mother. Maybe when he was a little boy, he took note of the fact that his mother's name was Tzivya. Tzivya in Beersheba. Tzivya. Today I'm sitting on the throne of David. Today I am the king. I am ruling. And if I'm ruling, so what's the difference who my mother is? My mother is something from my past. And maybe the text is trying to remind us, and perhaps remind them, and maybe that's one of the lessons for anybody who really wants to become a king of Yehuda or a leader of any sort. Don't ever forget the role of your mother in your life. You only got to the position that you got to. You were only able to achieve the levels of achievement, the levels of excellence, the levels of appointment to such a position. V'shem imo, v'shem imo, v'shem imo. Yes, you're the king of Yehuda, but v'shem imo. Do you remember the mother that nurtured you? Do you remember the mother that nursed you? Remember the mother that took care of you? Well, that mother is part of you becoming the king. And I wish I had the time to develop this idea, because I really feel this strongly in Tanakh, that there's a role of the mother, and the king of Yehuda is politely reminded never to forget his mother. One of the most beautiful sentences, in my opinion, I don't know if I'm one to choose which sentence is more beautiful than others, but a sentence at least that's very moving to me, is when the prophet Eliyahu, when Eliyahu Hanavi, in the 19th chapter of the book of Kings 1, Eliyahu Hanavi is appointing the chief prophet of Israel. And his name is what? Elisha, right? Elijah, right? His closest disciple. Elisha will now become the prophet, the Navi, the Navi Elisha. He will be the number one prophet of Israel. And he goes to Elisha and he tells him, "Okay, I'm going to appoint you. You have to come with me, join me, and you will be the leading force in the people." And he says as follows. He seems to pause on the way to going to his position of leadership. And listen to the beautiful words of our great teacher and leader and prophet Elisha. Vayaratz acharei Eliyahu. I'm reading chapter 19 of Kings 1, verse 20. Vayaratz acharei Eliyahu. He follows immediately. He goes. He runs. Vayaratz. He runs after Eliyahu. But he says, maybe I have to take a little detour before I could become the prophet of Israel. And you know what he wants to do? He wants to go kiss his father and his mother. He says, Vayomer, when I read this, I'm moved. I'm moved by this text. This text speaks to me in a very special way. Vayomer, eshakana la'avi u'le'imi ve'elecha achrecha. I want to kiss my Abba. I want to kiss my Ima, I want to kiss my father, and I want to kiss my mother, and only then will I go with you, Eliyahu. Maybe in order to be a prophet of Israel, you have to remember your father and your mother. You can't just be, well, who are you today? I speak prophecy. The Lord spoke to me. I have the message of God. That's true. But what about your Abba and your Ima? What about your connection to your source, to your father and to your mother? Elisha, perhaps, besides all of his other qualities, maybe he's able to reach this great level of being the Navi because he knows how to say, Eshakana la'avi u'le'imi ve'elecha acharecha. I hope it's not true, but I think I've met people in this world who don't kiss their fathers and their mothers. or maybe they feel it's something for a little child to do. Kiss my abba, kiss my daddy, kiss my mommy. Maybe in elementary school. Not when I'm already an advanced age. Not already when I'm a mature adult. Surely not when I'm a prophet of Israel, and not just a prophet of Israel, but the prophet, capital the chief prophet of Israel. And maybe that's the message of. Maybe that's the message of the whole long list of all of those great kings of Yehudah, who are reminded, and we are reminded, the names of their mothers, because the names of their mothers have to go with them into their kingdom. And I would like to suggest a teaching which I do hope that you will not ridicule, but if you do, it's on YouTube, I think, so I won't be able to hear your responses unless you tell me that. I was once thinking, is there a function for the fact that God left the navel on the body of each and every person after the umbilical cord is severed from his or her mother? Theoretically, the same way so many different wounds, heal in a very straight way, so too the commonly called, I don't know if it's a sophisticated term, belly button. Can I say belly button? Is that an acceptable term? What is this? What's the? Is there a medical function for the navel? Is there a medical function? Why not just have a smooth, direct healing for that severed cord? And that's it. It was a function for the helpless baby while it was in the uterus. Well, it was in the womb, and now they're on their own, and then, as we say, like the cord has been severed. It's no longer connected. I would like to suggest that maybe each and every time a person views that part of their body, maybe they're supposed to think about their mother. Maybe it's like maybe it's a built-in memory for mother. If it says B'Shem Imo so many times in the book of Malachim. Maybe each person in his or her world, in his or her home, in his or her life, also is a form of a king, right? A king. Well, okay, good. But V'Shem Imo, V'Shem Imo, V'Shem Imo, V'Shem Imo. Where do you see V'Shem Imo? Well, just notice. You remember Shem Imo? And if you don't remember Shem Imo, so maybe as you're viewing that part of your being, what is that? Oh, that's a remnant from Imo. That's a remnant from the time when I was so connected and ever so dependent upon my mother that I was completely helpless. Without my mother, I wouldn't have been able to live. Without Imo, without Imi, without the mother. And so perhaps there's a great teaching in the Talmud, in Tractate Berachot, on page 34. The rabbis teach that there are different levels of bowing during the Amidah prayer, during the Shmoneh Esrei prayer. And we bow, generally, the masses bow at 4 different points during the prayer. The beginning and end of the first beracha, the beginning and end of the Thanksgiving beracha, more or less 4 times. The rabbis say, but the Kohen Gadol, he didn't only bow 4 times. The Kohen Gadol had to bow at every single beracha, because he's the Kohen Gadol. The high priest bowed at every beracha. And the king, listen to this, Hamelech, Hedyot K'mo Shamarnu, the regular individual, the individual who is not a king and not a high priest, 4 times. Kohen Gadol Tehilat Kol Bracha Ubracha, the beginning of every single blessing. There are different versions of how to read it, but that's one version. Tehilat Kol Bracha, every single bracha, the Kohen Gadol has to bow down. But the Melech, the king, Hamelech, Kevan Shekara, Shuv Eino Zokeh. The king begins his prayer by bending over, and once he bends over, the entire prayer is said in such a fashion. He has to bend over the entire tefillah. Says Rashi, Kol ma shehu gadol biyoter tzarich lachni'a ulashpil atzmo. The greater the level of accomplishment, the greater the level of glory, the more the person has to be sensitive to making sure that they're humbled properly. Maybe the Shem Imo is there to humble all of the kings of Yehuda. And I don't know how many kings of Yehuda are sitting here, but you know, even if you're not the king of Yehuda, or maybe especially if you're not the king of Yehuda, I'm not sure. But maybe each of us should spend some time remembering constantly the Shem Imo. Many of us are called to the Torah by the name of our fathers. Everyone should be well. There's a custom in certain communities when someone is not well, they mention the name of their mother. So Bezrat Hashem, everyone should be well, and the name of the mother, is not mentioned in that context. But B'Shem Imo, maybe from time to time, not only to reflect on the names of our fathers. In the case of the kings of Yehuda, so maybe they were receiving the monarchy. Maybe they inherited the monarchy through their fathers. But not only are their fathers important, but B'Shem Imo, as we read in our Haftarah, Tzivya Mibe'er Shava. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much.